Three,
right.
2, 1.
Beep.
You're listening to The Pocket. Welcome to the show, Nathan Brown, of course, co-host today, and our special guest, Mr. Andy Waldeck.
Hello, America and the world beyond.
This is the internet. It's the galaxy.
The galaxy. Bring it on.
And beyond. Andy Waldeck, aka Daddy Baba on the bass.
Hey, guys.
It's great to see you, man.
Great to
Again,
see you. Thank
I feel
you
like
so
I
much.
just saw you.
That's right, you did. I
Let's
appreciate
not
you
talk
guys
about
having
that
me
gig.
on. It's great to be here. I'm honored to be part of this, and just really appreciate it. It's good to be here.
Right? Just good to be alive right now in this strange world. So Andy, like, these conversations have come out of us coming back together as a band and really like realizing that so much of what we loved about being in a band was hanging out together, right?
Yeah.
And especially coming back together as adults and being
Sure.
healthy and having, you know, a deeper sense of humor and appreciation for things. And
Yeah.
so, I just said, hey, Steve, let's start doing these and just get our friends on and just like talk about the old times and the new times.
It's a wonderful idea. I'm so glad you guys are pursuing this, and the octopine tendrils that extend outward from you guys are vast. And you think about how many different people, you know, we've all sort of been connected to musically. It's really an incredible network. It's deep and really has a history. It's very rich.
Yeah, for sure. And so America, as you're listening, Andy, I'm excited to have Andy on this podcast because not only is he an old brother of ours, but I'm going to let him tell a little bit about himself, but he's the original polymath of our group, the original Renaissance man. And I always remembered coming up because I didn't know anything about funk music when I came to jam. I saw you guys and I'm like, what is this? Somebody's land on the moon. And then getting to know you, it was just like you were a songwriter and you knew about like all this music and you were just like this incredible bass player and like you could fix basses and build basses and build guitars and you surfed and you knew how to fix motorcycles. And I was like, that like guy is like, it's legit, man. So maybe before we, I geek out a little bit more, tell us a little bit about like your background, where you're from, you know, just give a little what's up.
Right on. Well, I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in the suburbs of Milwaukee. My dad is an eye surgeon, and my mother was a housewife who later became a realtor. In my family, my mom played the piano, and my sister took piano lessons. At the time, I thought piano was totally not cool, so I didn't take piano lessons, and I wish that I had. At this point in my life, I really, really wish I'd taken piano lessons just to have more keyboard knowledge. Because as a music producer, which we'll get into later, I'm sure, it's just become like a wall that I have to slowly chip away at. But nevertheless, when I was a little kid, I think maybe 8 or 9, I saw this film of Jimi Hendrix on a TV show, and he was just, you know, doing what Jimi Hendrix did with and to the guitar. And I just stared at that, and I knew right away that that's what I wanted to do. I felt extremely and peculiarly connected to the crazy sounds that he was creating, and the way he was like, he played the guitar as if he was like counting on his fingers. It just seemed so natural. So I, you know, begged and, you know, pleaded with my parents to get me an electric guitar, and it didn't happen. And then another year went by, again, begging, it didn't happen. Third year, I'm 10 years old, got the electric bass for Christmas. So, you know, I said, I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, this is incredible, you know. And I said to my dad, you know, this is a bass, right? And my dad never being one to really admit that there was a mistake made, he just said, yeah, you're playing the bass. You're a bass player. And really, that's how it happened. I wanted to be a guitar player. I wanted to be Jimi Hendrix. But I got a bass at age 10. And I started playing, you know, kind of teaching myself. Like I had a book, I think it was a Mel Bay electric bass book. You guys remember the Mel Bay series? for just about every, instrument, beginner level. Took some bass lessons for a couple of years. And when the high school kids found out that I was a bass player, I was still in junior high. They started enlisting me for their gigs, these house parties in these basements. My mom would drive me in her country squire station wagon and drive me off, or wait outside while I dragged my gear in and played for a couple hours and dragged it back because I was still very young. At some point, I got more interested in girls and sports and motorcycles and stuff, and the bass kind of became a forgotten thing, which is weird looking back on it. But I put it in the case and put it under my bed and completely forgot about it for a few years. And then a friend of mine was over and we were just hanging out in my room, and he looked under the bed. He's like, "Dude, you have an electric bass." So I was like, "That's right, I have an electric bass." It just suddenly came back. It was just a brief hiatus. So probably from, age 14 on, I've just been playing constantly. Music, I always felt like it was a huge part of me. In fact, I've always said to people, and you guys probably heard this quote from other people before, but I didn't choose music. Music chose me. I was very compelled to follow my instincts and the drive and the passion for it. It was just in me. And I don't know necessarily where it came from. Some of my family members are really creative. Some are more, science oriented. Yeah, it's just always been a part of my life. When I told my father that I was going to go to Berkeley College of Music instead of medical school, it was a real punch in the gut for him. But he let it happen. And I went to Boston and went to Berkeley for a year. And that's where I met Joe Lawler, who you guys had had on. That was a big, catalyst in my life, because I felt like I had met the guitar player version of bass player me. We got along great. I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but I was sort of weaving it all together. That was important because I realized at that point at Berkeley that as much as I was learning there and enjoying soaking up that more technical sort of academic version of music, I knew that right then that I wasn't going to be that kind of musician. I knew that I was going to be much more of a player from the gut, from the heart, and using the intellect that just ear training and time spent on the instrument and playing with other people brings about. I can't read a lead sheet to save my life. At one point I could read fairly well, but I haven't sight read a chart in ages, standard notation. So, but that's never slowed me down, obviously. So, the path of music for me has always been very instinctual and very natural. It's never been a struggle. The lifestyle of a musician has been a struggle. There's been times when that's been hard. But the pure joy of music and the excitement of unfolding, you're uncovering the next pedal of whatever it is you're trying to discover, whether it's putting a band together or writing songs or, working on your show or your individual showmanship or your individual perspective on what you're trying to do. Because really, it's entertainment, but it's also this sort of it's this sort of subliminal satisfaction that you get from doing this thing that you feel like you were sort of born to do, whatever that is.
Yeah,
I know you guys can both relate to that.
Yeah. You're about
Absolutely.
to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on a thing that I know that maybe some people don't about you, and that is, we have the Berkeley side of things, we have the gig side of things, the different projects that you're involved in and have been, and your prolific nature of writing. But I want the people to know about that side of you that, okay, so you're growing up, you're in the basement, and you have something sort of like for me, it was my older brother, and he was always playing music. Okay. So
Yeah.
I have this connection that puts the songs of, even before I even wanted to play music, I was living music through my brother, right?
Right.
So you had a jukebox in your basement, did you not?
Yeah.
So every
Yeah,
now and again, okay, when Andy and I are on these long drives, we'll hit this, you get to this point in the drive when you're kind of zany.
Yeah.
All right. We used to call it box madness. All right. But Andy and I will get into this zone where it's doo-wop hour.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
after you've been on the road for like 2 or 3 hours, it's like, okay.
Yeah, we're going to do street corner, like New York style stuff.
Yeah, man. And so Andy had this jukebox in his house growing up
Yeah.
as a kid. So even when he was working on motorcycles or skateboards or, whatever he was up to at the time, there's always this music that's like it's like you're exposed to it in such a different way. You're not studying it necessarily.
Yeah.
But it's just a part of your everyday, like it's in the house, man. Dad's cranking up the and what was that? There was something yesterday or the other day when I was like, now who wrote that song originally? And Andy was like,
I know what it was. You
okay.
said, was it Crimson and Clover? You said,
who originally wrote Crimson and Clover? And it wasn't
Tommy
Joe and Jet.
James and the Chandels. I know that because it was a 45 on my dad's jukebox that we had in the basement,
Dude.
I have a really peculiar knowledge of 50s and 60s music. In those days, it was less labeled and boxed in than music is these days. It was pop music. And in those days, anything that was pop stands for popular. So if it was in the top 100, people around the country heard the songs and they knew it. So that was, that covered a lot of ground. You're talking about early Motown, talking about early Stax, we're talking about, early Muscle Shoals stuff, New York City, street corner doo-wop, talking about, Dion and the Belmonts, talking about, all the groups that we do those, like some of them just had 1 or 2 hits, but you'll never forget them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Smoke Gets in Your Eyes.
Right.
Tell Me Why Do Fools Fall in Love? All those songs, it's like they're so primal. They're like the beginning of rock and roll. And I don't know. I always thought it was a blessing that I had that sort of early education and that stuff, because it makes you really appreciate where music has come from and the distance that it has traveled to get where it is today, and that huge vast space in between. But there, it's come back to a place in my mind where there's some peculiar similarities to the way it was back in those days.
How so?
Well, on 2 levels. As a business, when in the late 50s and early 60s, you could buy a 45 single for 99 cents. It had an A side and a B side. That was what records cost, 99 cents. So here we are, in 2021. How much does a single cost on iTunes?
Right.
99 cents. So we've come to a place where people paid really huge, exorbitant amounts for think about like when you're buying Led Zeppelin records or Beatles records, back when they were still being made, they were expensive. You could pay 10, 12, 15 bucks for something that costs the record company 40 cents to make when they're making 500,000 or 1 million of them. You know what I mean? Those are the big profit days for in the music business. And the other way that I think that music has come full circle in those ways is that we have gone through in the early days, as you guys can totally attest to, 3 or 4 chords and a really great hook was really all you needed. That was what made a hit song. And then we went through this, all the colors and the excitement of psychedelic era, and then the Americana, the early Springsteen and all that stuff, Tom Petty. And then it's come back to like big pop songs on the radio these days, 3 chords and a really good hook. It's, that's what makes, or at least that's where we are again, is all I'm saying. I feel like this long journey has happened.
Yeah, and regardless of the genre, regardless of whatever genre it is, if it's popular, you're going to hear it. It's pop.
Oh yeah.
And so a lot of musicians that we came up with used to sort of badmouth the term pop, like, oh, they're a pop band.
Yeah.
Well, that would be great if your music were popular.
We should all be so lucky, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Andy, you bring that up about the doo-wop stuff, because I always remember growing up like just with an attitude and just hearing like old songs from the 50s and being like, oh, that's like old timey music, right?
Yeah.
Like growing up with like Sandman, the Sandman, boom, 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 and being like, that's really creepy sounding. Like that's that's not my jam at all. And then as I kind of got older in the path of everything, and I started to look at the history of music, and you start to look at like the history of a lot of what came out of World War II were a bunch of returning veterans, and a lot of those veterans became truck drivers. And the whole thing with like the issue of like speed and truck drivers came because these veterans came back with speed addictions because they were given speed to fight the war.
Sure.
And they started traveling around the country, and you start to look at the 50s as being this time when like things were like really aggressive and they were expanding really quickly. And there was actually a burgeoning underground underneath all that like nice stuff. And you got this sense, like this urgency with the music, that it's easy if you don't look at it in that context. It just looks kind of like, oh, it's like really kind of like bubblegum pop and stuff like that. There's all this like urgency to what's going on. And you're like, oh yeah, if you're growing up in that era, man, and somebody's like throwing down some Buddy Holly on you, you're just like, man, that sounds so radical right now.
Yeah.
It was just mind blowing. And so to like yourself in the mindset of like where people were and what they were actually doing, they were just crushing the cultural wave. And like, just, it was like so badass at the time,
Very true. Very true. I totally agree with that. And I think especially with Afrocentric early rock and roll, like you think about what was going on guitar wise before Chuck Berry started walking across the stage and screeching those notes, or even we're talking obviously like in the 50s, the guitar players that were breaking new grounds, Chuck Berry, Chet Baker, these kind of guys were just distortion, a guitar amp that's turned up so loud that it's distorting. Like I think in early days, what you're talking about, pre that era that you're talking about, the explosion of that cultural element, that would have been considered like untenable. They wouldn't have allowed that. A guy in the studio would be like, oh no, let's get you smoothed out there, buddy. But they really wanted that edge, that distortion. Sort of represented the distortion of the American dream that was held out there as this reachable brass ring for lots of Americans. But the reality was that we were still fighting huge amounts of racial disparity in the country. And at that time, even though the middle class was a new concept and was becoming a larger force, just economically, the haves and have-nots were still polarizing away from each other at exponential rates. And obviously we can talk about politics all day long, but it's just part of America. The growth and the expansion and contraction culturally of American society is reflected directly in our media, particularly music. I will say films and books and all that as well, but that's not our forte. We're musicians. So when we look at what's going on at the time and listen to music at that era, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense that there was this and this happening at that time,
Dude, I would like to jump and transition here because a word that stuck out and a whole like a mindset stuck out to me because being a white suburbanite kid, as out there as I got was Hendrix, right?
Yeah.
And maybe some Rush. And so I was basically raised on the radio. I
Sure,
knew like every single lyric to every single song, every solo. I knew it. So we get to JMU and I see these guys playing outside and they have this horn section. And I'm just like, wow. And so this is one thing. So I get to college and I meet people like you who like talk about distortion and taking things to the extreme, and then I'm introduced to bands like Fishbone and like, Bad Brains and this whole side of things that like Craig was saying earlier, there's this undercurrent, there's this passionate, like, it's like boiling over, you know? And so that's what I think about when I think about meeting you guys for the first time, you and Joe and Glenn.
That's good
And
to hear, dude. I like to
oh
hear that
man, and
we
it
had
was just,
influence
it
by the
opened
end.
my mind, like it blew my mind. And then getting to know you guys and playing shows with you, man, how did Egypt, like, how did you guys start? And then what was the, like the driving force that gave you your sound? Because you
Well,
guys were really, really out there, like punk, aggressive, funk, great songs, all of that combined into this incredible presentation.
I think we were influenced by all the right elements that created what we became. Because you just mentioned it, I had moved to Vienna, Virginia with my mom after getting out of Berkeley. And the main reason I came was because of the Washington, D.C. go-go music scene, which I had just been turned on to by people at Berkeley. We're like, have you heard this music from Washington, D.C.? It's like funk with this lazy kick drum beat. It's called go-go. And it's very like regionally centric. It's really all about Washington, D.C. And first of all, that groove is like, as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh my God, it just got me. It just hooked me instantly. And all the way to do the hand percussion and the chanting, it was very primal. And it was like, it reminded me of funk, but with this, there was something special and different about it. It was, you guys know what I'm talking about. So there was that. And then there was Bad Brains, Fugazi, Black Flag, the whole punk scene that was happening in DC with Discord Records and all that, a Minor Threat, all these bands, and I was in that too. So when Joe came down from Massachusetts after he got out of school, it took a couple tries to get it together. We had formed something and tried to get it going, and then we looked at it and we're like, this is really what we're talking about, what we're thinking about. So we called that a little check on the fail box. We moved to North Carolina with some friends who were going to college so we could just try a different scene. So we're living in Wilmington, North Carolina. We hooked up with a top 40 pop touring band and we jumped on for a year with that, playing like literally 5 nights a week. But now it was like building up the chops and building up the knowing how to present a song that wasn't yours, just a cover band thing. Then we get back to DC after that's over. Then we're really ready. Now we know what we don't want to do, and we know pretty much what we want to do. So, we started off with a much bigger band. It was, me and Joe, Ken Walton on drums. I don't know if you guys remember, Tony Terry played saxophone, and Michael Shepard was our singer. Great guys, great band. We really broke a lot of doors down at that time. We went down and we got invited to open up for some band. Can't even remember who now. Oh, at the Bayou that was owned by Cellar Door. Cellar Door was also a booking agency at that time. And they said, yeah, come and open up for this band. And all of the Cellar Door executives were there, people who we all know now, the Boyles and those guys, And we went and opened up for them and just wiped the floor with them. And afterwards, those guys all came to like a little dressing room at the Bayou where we were in. They're like, you guys are it. We want to do this. So we signed a booking agreement with them and started playing pretty regular at the Bayou and other venues that they had a good foothold in. And that's really how that started. I was happy with the way it was going, but I knew that we weren't quite there. It wasn't as aggressive as I had hoped. And it was mainly because of Michael. He's a great guy. I love him to death. Wonderful singer. Not a very aggressive guy, just more of a singer's singer. It was more of like a Al Jarreau. What I really wanted was an Al Green, So we parted ways with Michael, and that was when we were a 3-piece for a while. I was just like, can't find the singer that I want. I'm just gonna do it, fill the time up, fill the gap till we find the guy. And that lasted for 2 years. And then finally, Jeff, 24/7 Spies broke up. Jeff moved right
Jeff
into the
Broadnight,
house.
to be clear.
And Jeff Broadnight, yeah. He got that job. we had opened for 24/7 when they had their original singer, Peter, at the college at Mary Washington in Fredericksburg. And we were friends with them, and they had their singer, Peter, had left, and they called down and asked us if we knew anybody. And Joe gave him Jeff's number right when we were getting rid of my guy. I was like, Joe, no, that's our guy. So he went and played with Spies for 2 years, toured the world, made 2 records. And so we were kind of like waiting for him really to get done. Because when it was Jeff, me and Joe, and it was Glenn for a little while, but he needed to move on to different things. And we ended up with a couple different drummers. Tony, what's his last name?
McGee.
Tony McGee. Shit. Don't tell him I forgot that. Great, powerful drummer for BC. Powerful drummer and a powerful human being, like really big presence. Love that guy. And anyway, so we kind of went through him, and then it was Mike Taylor. And then we went through him, and the whole time we were kind of waiting for Kevin. Again, another musician that we knew we wanted that guy, but he was a committed dude. He had been with Full Stop for a few years, and he had made a promise to those guys that he was gonna, stick it out to the end of the year, and he did. We waited for him, and then when it was done, and we got Kevin in the band, I felt at that point the band was finally the way that we had always wanted it to be, and we did a lot of great work. That's when we started making records. We never made an Egypt record before those days. You know what I'm saying? We did the first couple demos with Tony McGee, and he played on Soul Hammer, and then Kevin sort of finished up that record with us. And then the next one, the Drowning in the Promised Land, was all 4 of us.
Kevin. And so the audience know that Kevin grew up with young Nathan here.
Yeah.
So this is like a family affair.
Yeah. The drummer brothers. The brothers from another drummer. Yeah, when these guys are together on stage, as you know, Craig, it's outrageous. The level of polyrhythmic intricacies, it baffles the mind. It's hard to actually take it all in. A couple of minutes is about all that the average mind can handle. These guys are like toying with the rhythm, flipping it around, flopping it around, pushing and pulling.
Yeah, dude.
It's so rad, dude. Like that's extraordinary work right there.
Yeah, there was a time period when I got introduced to Kevin, and he was really getting in the mix, and Nate and I went down to East Tennessee State to visit those guys, and they're like all the rhythm world down there. And then from then on, we were watching like drum competitions, like stick competitions and things where it was like race car drivers, people who are dedicated to the subdivisions and the craziness of it all, man.
Yeah, that drum line stuff, that drum corps stuff is amazing.
Yeah, again, Kevin, when I met him, it changed my life, completely changed my life, because he was coming from that like 1% of people who can actually comprehend and play that type of drum corps. The intricacies, again, like you said, they're just mind-blowing. Yeah. And I didn't have any idea that even existed. I was like, what is this? And so he opened my mind to that thing. And he's one of those guys who is, he's very rare breed, because he can understand that. He's a very intellectual person to begin with, but he can also play that stuff from the heart. And there's a fine line between, especially drummers, I think, where they love to geek out, but it's pretty one-dimensional. Yeah. It's like da 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 da, whatever it is. It's like, yeah, well, that's great and everything, but can you play something that actually grooves a little bit?
Yeah. What you're talking about is that rear cross section of academic drummer, someone who studies and participates in drum corps type drumming, because we're talking about nanoseconds, subdividing a beat into 30 seconds or 64ths, and being able to hear the distinction between a well-played roll at 30 seconds or a sloppy one. I can't do that, but you'll hear drummers with that sort of academic background be very it's almost like oh, that was shit. You know, or can we say that on the podcast? That was shit. They'll be like, you know, that was
Sure.
garbage. And I'll be like, sounds just like the one before. No. The other one before is clean. That one
And
was
that's the
clean. This one
thing.
was garbage.
That's the thing about Kevin is that, you know, he came from that world, and, you know, now he's in the Nashville world, and he's a touring drummer, which is a very precise on the grid type of situation. And he's in his element.
Yeah.
But he's also one of the rare guys who can, he can serve up the nasty. He serves up the nasty, and a lot of the drum corps guys can't, you know.
Yeah.
Kevin can lay it down like it's supposed to be laid down, nice and fat and greasy when it needs to be. And I think he was a really good fit with Egypt, because he likes to hit like a man.
Oh,
you know. And Egypt it's like that. So, you know, I agree, man. When Kevin came into the Egypt fold, it was like,
yeah, that's when it really came together and gelled for me. And it was also cool for me at the time, because up till then I had been the primary songwriter. You know, Joe would offer up a riff here and there that we would create something around. But as far as like, you know, putting meat on the skeleton, it was always me. But when Jeff came in, he had some songs, and they were cool songs. They were songs that I would never write. You know what I mean? So the gelling, you know, having Kevin in there all of a sudden, a really solid, reliable drummer that I could click with. You know, Joe was really just being Joe, you know, as he's always done. Having Jeff there bringing these new songs, you know, like So Confused. You know, the song. So I would never write a song that goes, and the bass line is just busting. Like there's a note on every kick and snare on that bass line. I'm like, oh man, I like this. I'm glad I didn't write it, but yeah. And so having Jeff there and at that point was great. So yeah, we just started making records, and you know, it was, you guys were already at that point. You guys were already like, you know, everything was already. You guys were already on your way. You guys at that point, we finally got our act together. I'm trying to think what year that was. Probably 92 or 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we played with you for the first time in '89, I think, right?
Oh yeah, it was one of your first gigs. I remember you guys said that. It was,
yeah, like our first traveling gig. I think it was Lucky's in Radford. Is that correct, Nate?
Yes, sir. That's a first traveling gig, and we were exposed to the black light show of Egypt at Lucky's.
You guys must have been like, who are these weirdos?
Yes.
It was amazing. It was just like, you know, it was a revelation, because, you know, we've talked a little bit with Joe about this. Like, I grew up on the Maryland side of DC. So all of the influences that made Egypt, like I was under the same influences, but like we got a totally different take. Like the Maryland side of things was like, there was like a lot of punk and a lot like Eurocentric progressive music, right? Like, you know, you get your little Euroflop haircut and listen to the Cure and listen to like the Clash. And so like, yeah, when I met Steve, and I didn't even know what ska was. I was like, what is this? This is amazing. And I saw Randy's band Tweed Sneakers playing Fishbone.
Yeah, they were great.
They wrote those Fishbone songs. I was like, this is amazing. I love college. I want to go here forever. Like horns and that, and you can cuss. And then I saw you guys, and it was just like, what's happening to my brain right now? And then you guys at the time, you were doing the guitars around, like the
spins.
Yeah, the spins. And I was just like, that's impossible. How does that happen? They got wireless. You had wireless on your guitar, and you're just like, oh, they're from space. This is amazing. Sign me up.
Oh man, that's funny. Yeah, those were good times. You know, I think for us, we just wanted to be, you know, as like as out there as we could be, but being true to ourselves, you know, as players and stuff. And you know, it was great. It sounds like it was well received by you guys, and in a lot of circles it was. But you know, our whole act, and the way that we present ourselves, it didn't work on everybody, you know. And we had this great relationship with the people that owned Hammerjacks up in Baltimore, and man, they put us on every show. So when we opened for Fishbone, it was awesome. When we opened for Spies, it was awesome. Living Color, it was awesome. When they put us on with Ice Cube, it was horrible. They're 90% African-American audience at Hammerjacks Baltimore going like this the whole time. And then they're like verbally abusing us in this very cool way, which I have to give them props for. They're literally going, Wayne's World, party on. Like 1,000 of them, you know. It's like, okay, we get it. We're white. We get it, you know. But you know, like I said, the whole thing, the whole Egypt as an entity, it just was really fun. I loved that band, and I still do. And you know, none of the groups that we're talking about tonight or today, there's no animosity at all. Everybody, you know, I love Jeff. I performed I was the officiant at his wedding. You know, Kevin talked to frequently. Tony McGee, hit him up on Facebook all the time. You know, Joe, obviously. Same thing with the whole Earth Dandy thing. You know, all the guys still tight.
Let's transition. Let's go to that now. Let's talk about
Sure.
Earth to Andy and how that transitioned from Egypt to Earth to Andy, and like musically how it was different, and the different cast of characters, all of whom have far-reaching tentacles into the music world. Like you were saying earlier in the conversation, like the family is just expanding at this point.
Yeah.
You know, everything is on the road doing what we were doing. You're in a whole new band, and the songwriting just went exponentially to this next level. Some of those songs, they're just amazing, and the execution, like with Tony and Chris being a perfectionist, both of them together, it's like perfectionist squared.
A little OCD goes a long way.
Oh my goodness,
making records, man.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about Earth to Andy.
So the transition, it's funny because we just left off with Egypt, where I was like, finally, the Egypt that I always wanted. But in reality, the chronological timeline it was, you know, from when we met you guys in '89, there was literally, you know, 8 years had gone by, you know, talking about from when we started the band, 10 years. So we were just doing our circuit. We were great from Boston to Florida and back and forth. Every once in a while, we would shoot out to Colorado with like the Authority or one of those bands and come back. But we had the same fans, same scene. And I felt like I just wanted to do something different. It was very difficult. You guys can imagine. These are like my brothers. You know, I loved them dearly. And I just felt really compelled to change it up. You know, it's another one of those old verbiage sayings that I like to throw around, that insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result from it, you know? So after some years of this, despite the fact that it was going well and we were making a living, I just felt like we were up against the wall. We couldn't break past that point. Could not get a deal from a major label. Couldn't get radio play in any city that we weren't hammering, you know what I'm saying? Like playing regularly. So I had been teaching myself how to play the guitar on the acoustic guitar that was in the band. And I was, you know, very primitive, very rudimentary. Didn't really know a lot of the fancy chords, so to speak. But I knew what I liked. And you know, if you know 2 or 3 chords, like I said before, you can start constructing a lot of concepts in mind. You can start putting songs together. So I started writing some songs, and they were definitely not easy songs. So I was like, all right, I'm just gonna cache these away for now. And then that cache started like having a form and a shape to it that felt more tangible and more presentable. And I had a conversation with Kevin. I actually did my little cassette 4-track, a little demo.
I remember that.
At that time I was calling it Ashes. And because it was like the ashes of the phoenix of Egypt dying and burning, you know, this is my Greek mythology. So I gave Kevin the demo. He's like, I'm in. He just loved it right away, you know. And I said, listen, this is gonna be a slow process because untangling this web of Egypt is gonna be very difficult, and I don't want it to be bad, you know. So we got together as we often did down in the Outer Banks and sat on the beach with our then manager, Clint Robbins, and we did this like once every couple of years to sort of figure out what the next move was. And the conversation opened up with the same thing. Okay, what should we do next? This is not working. This is working. And I said, listen, I want to interject and just say, guys, I'm really tired of what we've been doing. It's wearing me out. It's sucking the fun and the creativity out of it for me, because it feels very mechanical. And like, once you've done the same room twice a year for 8 years, it's just in every city, it just gets to be, it's repetition, and it's not, there's no fun in it anymore. So it almost seemed like it took the air out of the room, so to speak. There was an audible gasp, and then there was this great sense of relief, like almost collectively, this like,
Yeah.
like a breath of air out that we hadn't even imagined in 10 years. And it was super hard, and there were tears shed, but in the end, I think everybody wanted to say that, like, for one reason or another, it's time to try something different. Let's just agree to let this thing end. And we had dates on the calendar still. We had 3 or 4 more months of stuff we had to rock out. And those were the best shows ever. Knowing that we weren't going to do this again,
Right.
maybe forever, at least until someone said, hey, do a reunion show. We literally just blasted the daylights out of those last few months. And then we just, high-fived and hugged and walked away peacefully. It was a very good thing to do. So the next move was, I got with Kevin and started teaching him all the other songs that had happened. And the catharsis of Egypt ending and this new thing beginning was really fertile ground. So once I got going, songs just started falling out of my head. And they were, nothing was first person. It was all telling stories about stuff, life, different people, different things, mostly imagined, mostly character, like writing a movie about imaginary characters, not people in your life, so that you can present it in a really objective position. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Putting the band together was a little more complicated, because what we needed was what we ended up. It took a little while to get there. At one point, I thought, so I switched from bass to guitar, because that's how I wrote these songs. And you can attest to this, Craig. You write on an instrument, that's how that song speaks to you. If I write on the piano and I switch to guitar, it doesn't feel the same way as if I'm on the piano playing it, which is why I don't really write on the piano much. Guitar or bass, So I became a lead singer who played rhythm guitar. And I thought for a second that we were going to have a 3-piece. We're going to find a bass player, and that was going to be it. And I think Kevin reached out to Chris Cree and said, hey, we're doing this new thing with Andy. Would you come down and audition? And he did. He came down, and he had learned all the songs, had written bass lines for him. They were great. He was great. Perfect. He's awesome. And at the end of the rehearsal, I was like, dude, you got a job, man. You're in. And he's like, so you're going to be the guitar player, dude? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, Kevin was kind of like, yeah, dude, listen, man, awesome songwriting aside, you can't do this alone, man. You need a ringer. You got to have someone in there. He's going to make us all sound good. But Chris had played with Tony for years and years and years, since they were in college. I knew Tony as like this incredibly technical, really, really studied, versatile guy, sonically, stylistically, everything, and kind of a nerd, But he came down for the next, audition, and Kevin was like, "Don't, be cool, man. Just if you like, Tony, give me a little wink." We're like halfway through the first song. I'm like, I'm winking so aggressively at Kevin. He's like, okay, no secrets with this guy, and he's wide open. That was it. The band was born right there. And at that point, we had the good fortune of Kevin's sister, Dana, purchased the big nightclub in town, Trax. So we got to rehearse and build our band on this big stage with this big PA. And I think that was one of the reasons why we always, as soon as we hit the ground running, we presented ourselves like a big stage band. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There was no like garage element. There was no basement element. These are 4 professional guys who've done lots of different things together. Look at how big their show looks, just in terms of like spacing the gear out, spacing the band members out, moving across stage, communicate with each other visually and musically as well. So that was the birth of the Earth to Andy.
And how long? So it was a 4-piece, and how long was that ride? Because like we were at that stage, everything we were like just blind with gigs, right? So it's like you're telling me all these things, and I'm like, yeah, Egypt was about 8 to 10 years, and Earth to Andy was like I don't even remember from like 1994 to 1999 was like
95. So the summer of 94 was when we had that meeting and pulled the plug on Egypt and basically finished out the last gigs. And then I remember Chris came down. It was very cold, so it must have been January, February. We started getting, and by the spring we were up and running. So it was 95, and then yeah, good things happened fast for us in those days, including all the props and the help we got from you guys, because we started off, we opened up for you guys at the Bayou. That was amazing, and I think that was when they were closing it down. Wasn't that the last show of the? Was that in 95?
99.
99. Okay.
Yeah.
But we did some shows earlier there, and yeah, it was good, man. So we got lucky, and because of Trax and Dana, we got all the cherry picked opening slots for everybody,
And then you got to go out and record some stuff with, some seriously big, legit producers.
Yes.
Right. Well, it started with we actually did a lot of the hard work ourselves, getting that room full, and that was our home club. And because of all Dana's dedication and all of our hard work and really just rocking hard, we developed a really core following in Charlottesville, and we could put 1,000 kids into that room anytime we wanted. So after that happened a couple of times, the big dog in town, Corin Capshaw, was like, who are these punks, and he came to a show and like had a meeting with us after the show where he was just like, Corin, he's very concise with his, he's not very flowery with his comments. Just like, you guys got something here. And if you sign with any other manager, you're just playing T-ball. I'm the big leagues. We were like, oh, cool, very gangster metaphor, but all right, And we sure did. We signed with Corin and Red Light Management. At the time, it was obviously Dave Matthews Band, crushing it worldwide. Corey Harris, Earth Andy, and Agents of Good Roots. That was it. That was the roster. Where now it's 300 of the largest bands on the planet.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, the good things came fast at that point because Corin really knew how to shop a band. He had great power with RCA because of Dave's success and the contract that he had negotiated with them. Unfortunately, the Roots had just gotten signed. Agents of Good Roots had just gotten signed also to RCA, same A&R guy. So there was this sense of like, it's too nepotistic to have the same guy. And he loved us. He wanted to sign us. You guys know it's Bruce Floor. He works for ATO now. So at the time, it was like, we're going to have to look somewhere else. So, we showcased for Atlantic, Columbia, Interscope, Breeze, everybody. And it was some weird show down in North Carolina. We were opening for the Gin Blossoms, and these dudes came in with alligator shoes, looking very LA, and that's what they were. There was Larry Jacobson and I can't remember. They were from Warner Brothers, and they were the two A&R guys responsible for Irving Azoff's boutique label, Giant Records. And they basically said, you guys are exactly what we're looking for, which is exactly what I wanted to hear. So then once we got the deal going and we started recording in LA with Nick Launay, who had done the Silverchair records. And he also, at that time, his most recent success was Closing Time. So he did that record too. So that was still huge at the time. So we were excited to work with him. He was fantastic, wonderful. Chris Lord Alge mixed the record. Went up to Gateway up in Portland, Maine. Bob Ludwig mastered. So it was like the greatest of the greatest worked on this record. And it was a great record. It still holds up today, even sonically. It's 20 years old. It still holds up. Obviously, good good people do good work, it stands the test of time. But the long and short of that was that we had signed a 2-record deal with Giant. And somewhere after about a year of being signed, when the record came out, Irving Azoff, who was also a huge music manager, Christina Aguilera and Cher and a number of other huge acts, he was like, I'm getting tired of running a label. And he just told the people at Warner Brothers, we're dissolving Giant. And the way it went was, if you had made the record label any money in the past year, you would move over to either Warner Brothers or the other sister label, Reprise, also under the Warner Brothers umbrella. And if you hadn't, you were cut. And our record had just come out and it hadn't made any money. And we got cut. So there was a brief negotiation between Red Light and the label about the money that was promised for the second record. We got a small settlement, paid off the debts, and then we were like, wow, we just got screwed, like we were literally looking at a lifetime of making music and possibly nationwide or worldwide recognition on some level, and it just never happened. It was never allowed to happen. I also think that at that time we may have been misunderstood in terms of the genre that would have been appropriate radio-wise. You guys know radio's still king, man, even today. Radio marketing is everything, and getting put into a category that's not really what you represent, the body of your work represents, So what happened there was when I went out to LA before the band arrived to do some songwriting with some different people, this guy named Bruce Berman, who was a musical director for films, he approached me and said, hey man, I really love your songs, and we're doing, you guys remember the cartoon movie called Heavy Metal that came out in the 80s?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Famous heavy rock songs. Well, they were doing heavy metal too. And he had a rough cut for me. And it was, interesting because I've never seen a movie that wasn't done. It was like pen and ink in a lot of places. And then some of the scenes were done, but not rendered, et cetera, et cetera. It was interesting. He's like, this little spot right here where I need a song. So write me a song. So I looked at the spot and I saw what was happening. And I wrote the song called Still After You. He was like, this is brilliant. I love it. It's awesome. It's going in the movie. Well, then the guys at the record label heard the song. They're like, no, this is not going in the movie. This is going to be your first single. And I was like, no. This is not what we sound like. This is not really what the rest of the music is like. The songs aren't like this. Is only super heavy because we're going on a record with Monster Magnet and Stained, and Seven Dust. That's why I wrote this heavy song. I don't want this to be on the Earth Dandy record. And we fought, and eventually it was like, it's our way or the highway, kid, So what happened was they released Still After You as a single. It went to Active Rock. It crawled up to number 28 on the charts, and then fell off just as quickly as it got up there. And then we were stuck playing, like I said, heavy metal shows for the rest of the year. Like really, I mean, we played shows with a band called Death. We played shows with Seven Dust. They were cool guys though, and cool music, but Stained and all that stuff. Nothing wrong with that music. I love it, but that just wasn't what we were.
Right.
We're up there doing 4-part harmonies like Beatles style with heavy rock guitars, and everyone in the audience is like, and that was when face metal was first coming out. There's kids with spikes they were looking at us like,
Dude, Andy, it's funny that you say this because I'm sure like 99% of the bands out there have, if they've had any success, have this story in some form. Right. And it took me a long time to see the beauty is in what we're doing right now, which is the hang and the connection, like the humor of it all. And it's interesting because I actually read an article with George Clinton that he said something a few years ago, and he was talking about, he's like, yeah, most people think of like people in the music industry and artists. He's like, when they go for it, it's like a job where like you do something and you get better and you get a little bigger and you get promoted. And he's like, and if something doesn't work out, well, then you go here. He's like, it doesn't work like that at all. He's like, you go for something and it's like either you're looking at success or total annihilation.
Absolutely.
And it's like, and it's, especially, and I think, with now it's just like you can kind of be whatever you want, and you can, there's ways of getting to your audience. But yeah, it was just those things that would happen where it was like a turn of fate, where you're like things outside of your control, where you're like this, and you're like, let's do this. And you make one little thing and someone's like, hey, look, check this out. And then it's like, all of a sudden you're on a totally different river on a totally different boat. And you're like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, you're in the makeup room, and the makeup artist is like coating you in baby oil and putting on, and you're just like, wait a second, man, creative control here, buddy.
Yeah, I was never a fan of that. Like, let's bring out your features.
Yeah.
I look like a,
So we got like
website.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah. In the next like 5 minutes before we wrap, let's talk on again like a fun upbeat note, like some of the favorite. Do you have like any favorite shows that stand out to you, or favorite times on the road or in the studio, or people that you've met along the way that have influenced you?
Know, to be honest with you, there's too many stories to like rip them all off. I could say that there were some really great moments early on when I felt that I was being rewarded for my hard decision to be a musician, follow my dream professionally, and do it. And one of them was, and this was pretty early on, we played, I don't know, you guys might not have even been in school then. It was Egypt as a 4-piece. Michael was singing, Glenn on drums, Tony Terry had already left. And we got asked to open for Ziggy Marley and the Melody Makers at the Convocation Center at JMU.
First time I saw you.
Really?
Yep.
You were there?
Yep.
That's crazy, dude. So that was a big crowd for us. That was my first, like, thousands of people looking up. And I remember the pictures from that day. A picture of Joe doing one of these bending back things. There's like long hairs in the light. There's just a sea of heads. That was an incredible moment because, being a college audience, they were very warm and welcoming and very interested in what we were doing. It was really cool. It wasn't like, oh, you're not doing reggae? Piss off. It wasn't like that at all. We bring this thing, this sort of dirty funk rock thing that we do, and they were into it. They were digging it. And I looked out at that thousands of kids, and I was like, this is it, dude. I need this right here. Because, when you finish, boom, it's either chirp, 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 crickets, or it's anything in between. Just seems like which way are we headed? Is it up or down? I'm not quite sure. But that was a big one. Opening for the Neville Brothers, big one, just because they were musical idols of ours, And I learned about New Orleans and the New Orleans second line style of drumming and funk way late in my life. Like, I didn't get turned on to that until probably halfway through the Egypt thing. And I think it might have actually been, might have been Tony McGee might have been the first person to hit me to that style. And now I just feel like it's everywhere. I love that so much. It's everywhere. And have been down there a few times and knowing some musicians in New Orleans. Those are great moments. Obviously, we toured with STP. That was amazing. Huge world of different, one of my favorite bands in the world. At that time, they were coming back from a hiatus because it was the first time that Scott Weiland had checked himself into rehab. And so he was coming back so cold sober, and he was on fire. The guy was like amazing. We've seen lots of videos of him stumbling on stage or missing the words. The guy was incredible. It was amazing to watch every night. Just drive that bus. Like, he was just, people were just standing in the audience. Like, it would have been like people watching Jim Morrison back in the day. He was that compelling in those moments. So yeah, those are all great things. I'm gonna travel all over the world. It's been good. I'm glad to be home now, though. I love producing.
Right on.
I love making other people's music rock. I love playing with Nate on the weekends.
Yeah.
Making some jingle. I love seeing you guys coming back together and doing it again. We were doing Egypt reunions, back in 2004 and many years beyond that. And, the only reason why we've never done an Earth Dandy reunion is because Tony died 8 years ago. And I don't think would be a good thing to do that. We have released some singles and stuff, and we're just making music still. But I don't want to really play a show without him. But I love being home. I love my little home life with my wife and my kid and my studio, and going on the weekends and playing music. My days of chasing that brass ring are really, have changed a lot. Like, that is not really a goal that a 50-year-old man should really look at as something that he wants to chase, because we all know that what it brings with it is the satisfaction of achieving that goal is far outweighed by the pain and the suffering and the disappointment that the other people involved in your process just let you down or plain old lied to you. I'm not trying to end on a bad note. Saying, like, I'm happy with the way things are now, and like Craig, it took me a while to lick my wounds and get over all that, and say goodbye to those days, and really truly be able to look at like the guys that I spent that time with and think of all the good things that came out of that, all the great music, all the amazing connections, and focus on those positive things. And just don't worry about the industry being full of sharks and snakes. That's never going to change. All I know is that I'm not in the water with them anymore, and it makes it easier to be a musician, use my skill set to make a living. And
That's what I was going to say, man. If I can interject just real
Yeah,
quick,
dude.
a lot of people know you as, the performer, the writer, but there's a whole nother producer side of Andy Waldeck where you are extremely capable as a producer, and I've worked on projects with you, and it's it's a side of you that, I mean, we could talk for another couple hours about that, but
Yeah,
so people out there that it's not just songwriting, it's not just performing, but there's the technical side of producing and being able to be a good communicator and communicate with other people what their goals are and bring that to life musically. That's a skill set that you have.
yeah. Well, thank you for recognizing me there. It's probably only been maybe the last 10 years that I've, started to dabble in production and become more comfortable with it. I watched really closely when we were paying people lots and lots and lots of money to do this for us. John Sickett and Chris Lord-Alge and Nick Launay and Gary Berry and Alasia. When those guys were making records for us, I was paying attention to what they were doing, what mics they were using, how they were doing it and stuff. And I logged a lot of that information in my brain, and it comes out constantly thinking about the things I learned from people who I consider masters at the game. And I use that stuff. And plus, I just these days try really hard to use my ears objectively. Like when I'm working with an artist, no matter what genre, I try not to color them with too much Andy Waldeck. It's not my record, I'm trying to make their record as good as it can possibly be. So I remove my personality from the process, and I fill that in with like just helpful stuff. And sometimes it's just helping someone come out of their shell a little bit, sing a little bit with more conviction, or play a little bit better, or use their brain a little more, and not just sort of fall back on whatever their patterns are. Try to get them to do something different and unique. That's when you really like tap into that. Who's making music here? Yeah, I know we're making your record, kid, but I'm using my brain like as much as I was if I was writing a song with my bandmates and getting ready to go play a show somewhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, maybe we should have you back on and we can talk more about the songwriting path, because I feel like that's a deep well that we could spend another hour in.
Yeah, I'd be honored, you guys, anytime.
Dude, this has been great. And so and it's interesting too, just to touch on that, because like I said, like, I think it's, one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on is just how influential you have been to our band. I mean, literally, it was like, think about like the early Egypt days for me, and seeing that show at Ziggy and watching this combination of like funk, punk, rock, black lights, psychedelia, like the Egypt stuff, the metaphysics, like, you know, okay, what's a Ujit eye? Like that, you're like,
Yeah, right.
all this happened. What's the politics of it all? Like the element of like choreography. And it was just like, it was such a DC centric thing. So, you know, so just for being the original polymath, man, thank you, brother, man. And thank you so much for being on the pocket. And I want to talk with you some more. And Nathan, thank you for filling in for young Steven, who's away on a family affair.
Absolutely. It's a privilege and an honor. And you know, love you guys, man. It's been a great path, and there's more to come.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Andy Waldeck.
All right, Andy.
You've been listening to The Pocket.